They said some people become invisible long before they die, and that truth hung heavily the moment she stepped through the creaking doors of the old community hall, an elderly woman in a faded blue coat, moving slowly, as though every step was an apology. Nobody noticed her. Not the group of teenagers arguing over music volume, not the volunteers rushing around with clipboards, not even the families gathering for the town's Veterans Appreciation Ceremony. She stood quietly near the back, hands clasped, her thin shoulders trembling from the cold drafts sneaking in through broken windows. But what made her truly invisible wasn't the crowd or the noise. It was the life she had lived, one erased by time, buried under years of being ignored, underestimated, and forgotten. Before we go further, dear viewer, if this opening has already pulled you in, please like this video and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support helps us bring more powerful, true-hearted stories like this to life. She waited as the seats filled, yet no one sat near her. She didn't demand space, she simply made herself smaller, something she had mastered after decades of being spoken over, passed around, and pushed aside. Her name was Margaret Hale, but in this room she was the old lady by the wall. When the ceremony began, the mayor stepped up to the microphone, praising the town's brave veterans. People clapped, some wiped tears, but Margaret remained still, eyes lowered, as if ashamed to take up air. She hadn't come for recognition. She never expected any. She came because today marked 50 years since the day she returned from Vietnam, a war she had served in not as a soldier, but as a nurse who held bleeding young men in her arms, whispering hope into ears too terrified to hear it. But no one in her town ever asked what she sacrificed. No one ever cared. A shadow of melancholy flickered across her wrinkled face as she remembered the nights on the battlefield. Screams slicing warm air, dirt turning to mud beneath running blood, ships trembling from distant explosions. She had carried boys barely old enough to shave, praying they'd survive the helicopter ride. She had wrapped shaking hands, stitched torn flesh, and sometimes, when the heartbeat under her palm faded, she had closed a young soldier's eyes and whispered, "You're safe now." And yet, when she returned, there was no parade, no family waiting, no celebration, just questions about whether she had been useful. For the next 50 years she lived alone, carrying 1,000 ghosts that no one wanted to hear about. Today was supposed to be a fresh attempt, to sit in a crowd and pretend she belonged. But even here, she remained unseen. The mayor continued his speech, reading names of decorated individuals. Applause exploded around her, yet Margaret's hand stayed folded in her lap. She wasn't on the list. She never was. The medal she had received overseas sat in a box at home, tarnished with neglect, the same neglect she had grown used to. As the hall buzzed with excitement, a sudden hush rippled through the crowd like wind cutting through wheat fields. Heads turned, murmurs spread. The heavy doors swung open again, and in walked a tall man in crisp military uniform, decorated with an array of medals that sparkled under dim lights. A 4-star general, someone who carried storms in his stare and history in every step. His presence commanded the room like thunder commands the sky. The mayor rushed forward, stuttering in surprise, but the general didn't glance at him. His sharp eyes swept the hall, searching, until they landed on Margaret. The old woman shrank instinctively, unsure why such a powerful figure would look at her. The general inhaled sharply, his face softening, as though he'd just found someone he'd been seeking for decades. Without hesitation, he walked past the mayor, past the applauding crowd, past the cameras now scrambling to catch up. He stopped right in front of Margaret. The crowd held its breath. The old woman looked up, confused, her tired eyes flickering with discomfort. The general's jaw trembled as he gazed at her. Then, to everyone's shock, he stepped back, straightened his posture, and delivered a sharp, full military salute, one filled with reverence, gratitude, and profound emotion. Gasps spread through the hall. No one had ever saluted her before, ever. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth as tears formed along her lashes. "Ma'am," the general said, voice cracking, "I've waited 50 years to find you." The room fell silent, the ceremony forgotten, You don't know me, he continued softly, lowering his salute with trembling fingers. But I knew you. In Vietnam. Margaret's breath hitched. Memories flashed. Dusty tents, shaking lights, frantic footsteps, the metallic scent of blood. The general swallowed hard. I was just a 19-year-old private then. I had almost no chance of surviving. But you, his voice broke completely, you held my hand while I bled. You shielded me with your own body when enemy fire hit the medic tent. I should have died that night. Margaret's eyes widened, her chest rising and falling with sudden intensity. She remembered a boy, barely a man, whose blood had soaked her uniform as mortar shells shook the ground. She remembered whispering, "You're going home. You hear me? You hold on, soldier. You saved my life," the general whispered, tears streaming openly now. "Everything I achieved, every medal, every promotion, every soldier I guided. It's because you kept me alive." Margaret's lips trembled. No one had ever thanked her, not once in 50 years. The general turned to the stunned crowd, his voice rising with authority. "This woman is a hero. Not just mine, but a hero to countless soldiers. Without her, many of us would never have returned home." Applause started slowly. One pair of hands, then two. Then the entire hall erupted into a roar of respect so powerful it echoed off the walls. People stood, clapping, cheering, some crying. The volunteers who ignored her earlier now stepped forward, ashamed. The teenagers lowered their eyes. Families pressed hands to their hearts. And for the first time in half a century, Margaret didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, truly seen. The general knelt beside her chair and gently took her hand. "I'm here today because I heard a rumor. A nurse who vanished after the war. I promised myself that if I ever found you, I would give you the recognition you were denied." He pulled out a small box from his uniform pocket. Inside lay a medal, bright, polished, gleaming, a distinguished service honor, one reserved for extraordinary bravery. "This belongs to you," he said quietly. Margaret shook her head, overwhelmed. I didn't do anything special," she whispered, her voice fragile. "You did everything special," he replied firmly. "You saved lives when bullets were flying. You gave comfort when hope was lost. You carried the weight of war on your back, and you did it without expecting applause. That is the greatest kind of hero." As he pinned the medal onto her coat, the hall once again thundered with applause. But this time, Margaret didn't shrink or hide. She lifted her chin, tears flowing freely, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief, pride, and long overdue healing. The general helped her stand, offering his arm. "May I escort you to the stage?" She nodded slowly, and together they walked, an invisible woman who had finally been seen and the soldier whose life she had saved. Cameras flashed, children waved, veterans saluted her, and the entire crowd watched as the forgotten nurse became the honored hero she had always deserved to be. And as she stood before the audience, breathing in the warmth of recognition, she whispered to herself, "I mattered. I really mattered." Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support keeps stories of courage, humanity, and kindness alive.